Sadashivasamarambham Shankaracharya-madhyamam Asmadacharya-paryantam Vande Guru-paramparam. Good. Be seated, please. Rameshwara. Good. Okay. Good. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryan Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Very good. Welcome to you all. There you are. And welcome also to our many students taking these classes online. We can then continue in this first part of Chapter 18. We're coming close to the end of it. I think one more class. And then after this introductory part, then you'll be amazed at the final part of Chapter 18. We'll see that soon. Right now we're in the midst of this analysis in terms of sattva, rajas, tamas that we've seen going on for some time. We've already analyzed 3 kinds of jnanam, 3 types of karma, 3 types of karta, agent of action, and then 3 kinds of buddhi, intellect or knowledge, and starting today, 3 kinds of dhriti, resolve or effort, and then 3 kinds of sukha, which we'll see here shortly. We'll begin with recitation, starting with verse 33. As always, when I'm reciting, please read the translation and then repeat after me. Dhrityaya dharayate, dhrityaya dharayate, manah pranendriya kriyaha, manah pranendriya kriyaha, yogena vyabhicharinya, yogena vyabhicharinya, dhriti sapartha sattvaki, dhriti sapartha sattvaki, yayatu dharma kamartan, yayatu dharma kamartan, dhritya dharayaterjuna, dhritya dharayaterjuna, prasangena palakangshi, prasangena palakangshi, dhriti sapartha rajasi, dhriti sapartha rajasi, yaya swapnam bhayam shokam, yaya swapnam bhayam shokam, visharam maramevacha, visharam maram Navi munchati durmedha, navi munchati durmedha, dhriti sapartha tamasi, dhriti sapartha tamasi, sukham tvidanim trividham, sukham tvidanim trividham, shunu me bharatarshabha, shunu me bharatarshabha, abhyasad ramate yatra, abhyasad ramate yatra, dukhantam cha nigacchati, dukhantam cha nigacchati, yattadagre vishamiva, yattadagre vishamiva, pariname mritopamam, Pariname mritopamam tatsukham satvikam proktam tatsukham satvikam proktam atma buddhi prasadajam atma buddhi prasadajam Vishayendriya samyogad Vishayendriya samyogad Yattadagre mritopamam Yattadagre mritopamam Pariname vishamiva Pariname vishamiva Tatsukham rajasam smritam Tatsukham rajasam smritam. And we'll see the Tamasa Sukha when we're seeing the verses. All right. Back to 33. So this analysis, here we are, 33. This analysis continues to help us understand our own behavior. Remember the comment I've made several times, this is not for the sake of judging others. Oh, he's very sattvika, oh, she's very rajasa. In fact, that's harmful. It's harmful. Drop it. It's for understanding ourselves, and in particular, and we've talked about this before, but I'd like to state it once more because in my opinion, this is the most powerful, transformative, life-changing spiritual practice, and that is non-judgmental self-observation. Self-observation, which means to observe your own behavior, in particular, to understand what motivates your behavior. And then that crucial adjective, non-judgmental, to do that without negative judgment on anything you observe. This is for the sake of learning. It's like when you're learning something and the teacher corrects you. I remember as a young, I learned classical guitar in my 20s, very complicated. And I had this old-fashioned teacher from Spain. And I would just play 2-3 notes. He'd say, no, that's wrong. So those constant corrections were not meant to make me feel bad about my playing. Those constant corrections were meant to help me improve. In the same way, this process of self-observation is not to criticize. It's to help you do better each day. So that's our context. With that in mind, let's pick up the thread. So after talking about 3 kinds of buddhi, knowledge, in our prior class, now we have 3 kinds of dhriti. Dhriti usually means something like resolve. I think effort is also quite a good translation in as Sri Krishna uses the word. Let's see these verses now. First, sattvika dhriti, effort. Dhrityaya dharayate, dhrityaya dharayate, mana pranendriya kriyaha, mana pranendriya kriyaha, yogena vyabhicharinya, yogena vyabhicharinya, dhriti sapartha sattvaki, dhriti sapartha sattvaki. Good. Would you mind turning on that fan? Thank you. So last line, dhriti sadhritihi, partha, O Arjuna, sadhritihi, that resolve, that effort is sattviki, is the feminine form of the word. So what is sattvika? Dhriti, effort. Go up to the top. It is that effort, yaya dhritya, the effort by which, yaya dhritya, the effort by which dharayate, you hold, you restrain, you control what? End of the next line, the kriyaha, the actions, What kind of actions? The actions of your manas, mind, actions of your prana, breath, actions of your indriya, sense organs. Does this sound like meditation? Sure does. So the effort to control your mind, your senses, and your prana as in pranayama, and indriya as in Patanjali has the one of the angas, pratyahara, sense withdrawal, and then obviously restraint of the activities of the mind. Patanjali says chitta vritti nirodha. You can tell that I'm preparing a video that analyzes Patanjali's sutras to some extent. Anyway, so that's a little bit in my mind right now, but clearly this is a reference. Sri Krishna is making a reference to the practice of meditation by which you dharayate, you restrain mana, prana, and indriya, your mind, your breath, and your senses. How? Yogena, with the practice of meditation. What kind of practice? Avyabhicharinya, unwavering practice. Unwavering control of your mind, breath, and senses, Patanjali calls samadhi. And even though Sri Krishna doesn't use the word samadhi here, it's easily inferred. So, what is sattvika dhriti, effort? It's the effort you expend to meditate, to control your mind, to quiet your mind, to make your attention introvert, a process of meditation that, according to Patanjali, culminates in samadhi, a state of absolute absorption. This is sattvika dhriti, effort. Now we see rajasa dhriti. What do you engage your effort in? Yayatu dharma kamartan, yayatu dharma kamartan, dhritya dharayaterjuna, dhritya dharayaterjuna, prasangena phala kankshi, prasangena phala dhriti sapartha rajasi, dhriti sapartha rajasi. Last line is almost the same as the prior verse. Partha, O Arjuna, sadhritihi, that resolve, that effort is rajasi. Again, feminine in gender, it is rajasika. What kind of effort is rajasa? He says, yaya, and you have connected to dhritya. Yaya, dhritya, the dhriti by which, the effort through which, second line, dharayate, Arjuna, O Arjuna, the effort through which, dharayate, same word from the prior verse, to control, to direct your effort towards what? And that's the end of the first line. What are you striving for with your effort? What you're striving for is dharma, kama, artha. If we just change the order, it'll sound a little bit more familiar. Dharma, artha, kama. If you say, why isn't it in that order? It's due to the rules of meter. It didn't fit, so the words are out of order. And you may recognize those three words as three of the four purusharthas, goals of life. So I should say the conventional goals of life. Conventional goals of life means to gain contentment and satisfaction and happiness now, we call that kama. To gain contentment and happiness tomorrow and for the rest of your life, we call that artha, often translated as wealth. And then to gain happiness and contentment in whatever state follows this life, we call that dharma. accumulation of good karma, so that you reap the good results of that in a future life. So these are all typical worldly goals contrasted to the prior verse. Sattvika dhriti was directed towards meditation, meditation leading you to your true self, Atma, meditation leading you towards moksha, liberation, the fourth of these four goals of life. Here we have a reference to the three goals. We can distinguish them, moksha being a spiritual goal, dharma, artha, kama being, we can call them worldly goals, but Sri Krishna adds some important qualifications here in the third line. He says, someone who pursues dharma, artha, kama, these worldly goals, third line, prasangena, with attachment. One who is phala akangshi, one who is desirous of fulfilling his or her desires. Dharma, artha, kama are desires to be fulfilled. So one who is attached to those worldly goals, one who uses one's effort to reach those worldly goals, Sri Krishna calls that rajasa dhriti, effort directed in a worldly sense. So if sattvika dhriti is directed towards moksha, if rajasa dhriti is directed towards worldly goals, then what is tamasa dhriti directed towards? No goal. Let's see how Sri Krishna describes that. Yaya swapnam bhayam shokam, yaya swapnam bhayam shokam, visharam marameva cha, visharam navi munchati durmedha, navi munchati durmedha, dhriti sa partha tamasi, tisa. Excuse me. Sorry. Again, the third line is almost the same as the prior verses. Partha, O Arjuna, sadhritihi, that effort is tamasi, feminine gender. What is tamasic dhriti? He describes third line. The dhriti, which is durmedha, literally unintelligent, poorly directed. Where do you direct your effort? And sometimes we make a mistake. Have you ever worked we've all had the experience of working really hard on an unsuccessful project? Maybe at work, maybe at home. Not all projects are successful. You invest a lot of effort. Sometimes you invest a lot of money and you get no result. Why? The effort is misdirected. And Sri Krishna explains, what do you mean by misdirected effort? Effort that na vimunchati, effort that fails to free you. Free you from what? Top line. Free you from swapna. Here, sleep. Or you can also take a dream in the sense of daydreams. Daydreams. Bhayam, fear. Shokam, suffering, sorrow. Vishadam, depression. Madam, infatuation. Could also be intoxication. So these words, swapna, take it as sleep, I think. Fear, sorrow, depression, infatuation, or intoxication. These are all characteristics of someone actually who's depressed. We discussed that in our prior class. Someone who is depressed is asleep. Sometimes, by the way, people who are depressed often sleep 12 hours or more a day. And if you wonder why did they sleep so much, it's interesting to observe. Depressed people feel so bad when you're sleeping, at least you don't feel that. It's an escape. For a depressed person, sleep is an escape. Depressed people also feel bhaya, afraid to act, afraid sometimes to go out the door, afraid to talk to people. Depressed people suffer shokam, suffering. Vishadam is the word meaning depression. Madam, the depressed people are confused in their thinking. This kind of depression is meant to be overcome by dhriti. But here Sri Krishna says that the tamasa dhriti is the dhriti which na vimunchati, that fails to overcome the problems of depression. The inability to come out of that depression. I made reference in our last class that as a young man in my 20s, I went through I would say a severe depression, clinical depression. In those days, I wasn't smart enough to see a therapist or a psychiatrist. In retrospect, I would have come out of that depression much more quickly if I had. I didn't. I wasn't smart enough to do that. I toughed it out, and it took pretty much a full year to climb out. It's like climbing out of a hole. I think many of you have been depressed. You know what it's like. You feel like you're down at the bottom of this pit, and you look up, and the sides of the pit are so steep, and you say, how can I even climb out of this pit? And you just lay there and suffer, figuratively speaking. You lay there. Of course, no matter how deep that pit of depression is, one little step at a time eventually will get you out of that pit. And that's what eventually brought me out of depression, one little effort at a time. But in the absence of that effort, na vimunchati, you are not freed from the consequences of that depression. You remain in this state of lethargy, and that's what he calls rajasa dhriti. All right. Remember in our last class, in fact, I got several comments about the mantra that helped me come out of depression. Remember that mantra? Just do it. And the sense of that mantra is this. When you have a headache, you take Tylenol, not because you're in the mood to take Tylenol. You just do it. And that attitude is what can help someone like me who is depressed. Because when you're depressed, you feel like, I'm not in the mood to do it. That's a very common excuse. I'm just not in the mood to do it. Well, you don't need to be in the mood to take Tylenol. You don't need to be in the mood to get out of bed and do what needs to be done. So the mantra then is, just do it. You don't need to be in the mood, just do it. Okay, that concludes then the three kinds of dhriti. Now we have three kinds of sukha, which Sri Krishna, sukha means happiness, which he introduces in the next verse. Sukham tvidanim trividham, sukham tridhanim trividham, shunu me bharatarshabha, shunu me bharatarshabha, abhyasadhramate yatra, abhyasadhramate yatra, dukhantam cha nigacchati, dukhantam cha nigacchati. So the first half introduces this new topic. He says, idanim. You have to break apart the words tu and idanim. Idanim means now. Now, Arjuna, tu, but now, sukham, happiness, which is trividham, having three kinds, sattvika, rajasa, tamasa. And he says, Bharatarshava, O bull of India, O mighty Arjuna, shunu me, listen to me as I describe these three kinds of sukha. Now we begin with sattvika, sukha in the second half of this verse and the entirety of the next verse. So what is sattvika sukha? It is yatra, that kind of sukha which ramate, which you revel in, abhyasat, when you enjoy, while you're engaged in that pleasant activity, you enjoy it. And that enjoyment, negacchati, puts an end, negacchati leads to dukkha antam, that which leads to the absence of suffering. By the way, our translator here gets negative points. Translator, of course, is sitting in this chair. So, leads to the end of suffering as a proper translation. This translation is not good. Minus points. Okay. So, Sri Krishna begins to discuss, to explain sattvika sukha by saying that which delights you and leads to the absence of suffering. He further describes it in the next verse. Yattadagre vishamiva, yattadagre vishamiva, pariname mritopamam, pariname mritopamam, tatsukham satvikam proktam, tatsukham satvikam proktam, Atma buddhi prasadajam, Atma buddhi prasadajam. Can I share with you a note about Sanskrit? Atma buddhi. Notice I paused. Not Atma buddhi prasadajam, Atma buddhi prasadajam. I very carefully follow certain rules of meter. And one rule of meter is when that short E of buddhi is followed by a conjunct consonant. For those of you who like the nomenclature, samyukta vyanjana. The grammatical terminology is enough to scare you away from studying Sanskrit. Samyukta vyanjana. You call it conjunct consonant means two or more consonants together. So to follow the rules of prosody, they call them, the rules of meter, chandas. Properly, you require a small pause, atma buddhi prasadajam. I follow this all the time. I just thought it would be a good time to explain it to you. And if you see me, or if you hear me pausing in peculiar places, this might be the reason. Okay, let's see the rest of it. So what is this third line? Tat sukham, that sukha, satvikam proktam, is called satvika. What kind of sukha is called satvika? Last line, atma buddhi prasadajam. That which is prasadajam, born of the blessing which is atma buddhi. And atma buddhi can be understood in two different ways. A very obvious way is atma jnanam, self-knowledge, enlightenment. So, sattvika sukha could be understood as atma buddhi prasadajam, that which is born of the blessing, which is self-knowledge, which is enlightenment. I actually prefer a slightly different reading here. That prasadajam, prasada can, in addition to blessing, it can also mean calmness, quietude. Try this. The happiness, which is prasadajam, born of happiness, of atma buddhi. Here atma can simply be the reflexive pronoun one's own. Atma buddhi, one's own mind. So the happiness born of the happiness born of the quietude of one's own mind. I like that translation better because it really connects nicely to that sattvika dhriti. Sattvika dhriti was directed towards meditation. And with this interpretation, we're back to meditation. The happiness born from the calmness of your mind. We've discussed this in our meditation sessions, and this is something so important and actually so profound. And it is this. In meditation, when your mind becomes increasingly quiet, you experience increased contentment, peace, happiness. Now you've had that experience. The quieter the mind becomes, the better you feel, the more happiness you feel. And if you think about it, it's actually counterintuitive, because we most commonly think that our minds need to be engaged in some pleasant activity to produce happiness. But here, conversely, instead of engaging your mind, in meditation you disengage your mind. As your mind becomes quieter and quieter, you experience more and more. We could even use the word ananda. The quieter your mind is, what remains is ananda. And what's significant about that is it's an experiential proof that happiness is not produced by your mind, right? The fact that the quieter your mind becomes, the more ananda is present, it's proof in your own experience that happiness is not the product of your mind. In Vedantic understanding, happiness or ananda is your swarupa, your essential nature. By quieting the mind, you are removing obstacles to that happiness. The source of happiness or ananda is already present. It's your true nature, Atma Swarupa. That's why we say Atma is Sat Chit Ananda, source of contentment and peace. The mind, however, sometimes the mind reflects that happiness. Sometimes the mind obstructs that happiness. When you eat ice cream, or at least when I eat ice cream, you may feel different. I happen to like ice cream. When I eat ice cream, my mind reflects happiness. When I eat, sorry to say this, when I eat vegetables cooked into mush, when I eat mush, then my mind obstructs happiness. So this is how it comes. But the happiness is always present in potential form. It's your true nature. So this is, as I said, that last line you can take in two ways. And this Sattvika Sukha is either the happiness born of enlightenment, or, in my interpretation, it is the happiness that arises when your mind becomes quiet in meditation. And that explains the first half of the verse, because the happiness we're describing is, first line, yatadagre, that which at the beginning, visham eva. This is a famous thing that's often quoted. Visham means poison. That which at the beginning is like poison, and pariname, after it gets transformed, it is amrita upamam. It is like the nectar, sweet nectar. That which is like poison at first, but becomes like nectar. What could be referred to here, again, there are different ways of interpreting this verse, but here, the practice of meditation at first is vishamiva. And why? One main reason the practice of meditation is difficult at first has to do with your backside. You might not be used to sitting for prolonged periods of time. You might have back pain. And then an untrained mind is just wandering again and again. You bring your mind back to the object of meditation. Your mind wanders again. You bring it back, wander, bring it back, wander. It goes over and over and over and over. Meditation at the very outset can be difficult or unpleasant, vishamiva, like poison, so to speak. But pariname, when you persist in meditation, your mind quiets down, and as we just discussed, as your mind gets increasingly quiet, what do you feel inside? Amrita, that sweetness, that sweet nectar, the ananda, which is your swarupa, which is your true nature. Notice that I'm very careful in my language here. You do not experience ananda in meditation. This is a technical point, but it's really important, so let me just make sure that you're on board with me here. Why does, and this is true in Shankaracharya's teachings of Advaita Vedanta, why would Shankara say you do not experience ananda in meditation? He says so because ananda belongs to the experiencer. You are that ananda. Ananda is not something floating around that you experience. Ananda is you. As I said before, meditation removes an obstacle created by the mind. Ananda is already there. We remove the obstacles that obscure that ananda. For this reason, Shankara would vigorously say here, you do not experience ananda in meditation. Instead, he would say, in meditation, you are ananda, unobstructed by problems of the mind. Okay, then, what about rajasa sukham? Vishayendriya samyogad, Vishayendriya samyogat, Yataragre mritopamam, Yataragre mritopamam, Pariname vishamiva, Pariname vishamiva, Tatsukham rajasam smritam, Tatsukham rajasam smritam. Last line, tat sukham, that sukha, that happiness, rajasam smritam. It's considered rajasa. What kind of happiness is considered rajasa? Remember with dhriti, we saw that rajasa dhriti, effort, was worldly effort. So you wouldn't be surprised if rajasa sukha was worldly sukha. Notice that sattvika sukha comes from within. Rajasa sukha comes from out there. The big distinction is this can never be taken away from you. It can be obscured. When your mind, it's like clouds. In fact, I like this metaphor very much. Today the sun is covered by the clouds. Anything happen to the sun? Sun continues to shine, and these clouds will go away. So the sun always shines, whether you see it or not. Ananda is always present, whether you experience it or not. You see the metaphor? The sun always shines, whether you see it or not, and ananda is always present within, whether you feel it or not. Just like sometimes the sun is obscured by clouds, sometimes this ananda is covered by the problems of the mind, obscured. as it were. So this is the Sattvika Sukha as opposed to Rajasa Sukha, which depends on external things. I just gave the example of ice cream. Pretty soon that ice cream is over, because I have to be careful. You know the rule. So if you have if I have a big bowl of ice cream in front of me, you can be sure I'll eat the whole thing. So the trick is you have a bowl that's this big, and then it's piled really high. That way you feel like you're eating I have a whole pile of ice cream. It's not much, but it looks impressive. And that way, but no matter how high, if in a little bowl, how high can you pile that ice cream? Not that high. Which means before long, the ice cream is gone. Then what? Oh, that's the problem of all worldly sukha. All worldly sukha, without exception, is transient. And when that worldly sukha comes to an end, that which goes up must come down. That's why you'll find in scholarly commentaries, we talk about this. They say that sukha is invariably connected. This is how commentators talk. Sukha is invariably connected with dukkha. Now you can see why they would say sukha is invariably associated with dukkha, because when sukha comes to an end, it is followed by dukkha. That's the problem of worldly happiness, which Sri Krishna describes here. Tat sukham rajasam. That rajasa sukha is, go up to the top now. It is what kind of sukha? Vishaya indriya samyogat. It is the kind of happiness that comes due to the samyoga, the connection to what kind of connection? Connection of Vishaya and Indriya. He actually explains it in a technical way. When the Vishaya, the ice cream, comes in contact with the Indriya, the tongue. These are technical terms. So Vishaya means object, Indriya means sense organ. So when Vishaya, the ice cream, comes in contact with the Indriya, the tongue, when there is the samyoga, the touch, the connection, then you have Rajasa Sukha. And now look how he describes Rajasa Sukha. It is yattara gre, that which is at the beginning, amrita upamam. It is like nectar at the beginning, but pariname, but later it becomes vishamiva, like poison. Why? There are several ways of understanding this. One we just discussed, that at the beginning you enjoy the ice cream. I enjoy the ice cream. But then when the ice cream is over, the sukha is over. What goes up must come down. There's another kind of odd metaphor here also that really works in modern times, and that is our relationship with food in general, not just ice cream. But when you eat all of that food, it's especially ice cream, amrita, amrita, amrita. But later, as the stomach bulges out, you step on the scale and another 2 pounds are there, and you realize that it's hurting your health. So the ice cream that was so enjoyable becomes a threat to your health and well-being. Rajasa Sukha. All right. That must lead us then to Tamasa Sukha. Let's see that. Yattara Yadagre chanubandhe cha, yadagre chanubandhe cha, sukham mohanam atmanaha, sukham mohanam atmanaha, nidralasya pramadotam, nidralasya pramadotam, tattamasamudahratam, tattamasamudahratam. Can I show you that meter rule again? Third line. Nidra alasya is a short vowel, but you have to pause before the pra. Nidralasya pramadotam. So that pause comes as opposed to the next line. Tattamasam. Tamasam is the end of the word, but you can't pause at the end of the word because it's followed by a short vowel. So don't pause when you can't pause. Tattamasamudahratam. Don't pause at the end of words. The pauses are determined by the meter. Okay, sorry to bore you with this, but just seemed like a good opportunity to share that with you. Start in the last line. Tattamasam udahratam. Udahratam, given as an example. What is given as an example of tamasam? Sukham. The word sukha is actually up in the second line. So what is an example of tamasa? Sukha. He says in the third line, nidra, alasya, pramada, uttam. Uttam, that which is produced by nidra, sleep. By the way, do you enjoy happiness and sleep? Yeah, why not? Nidra, alasya, laziness. When you're just sitting in a chair doing nothing and relaxing. Happiness. And pramada. Now, the more common Vedantic meaning of pramada is error, but I think here the better translation is intoxication, which is another common meaning for pramada. So take pramada now as intoxication. Someone who drinks a lot of alcohol or takes drugs, they enjoy sukha. But that sukha is tamasa. Now, the tamasa of deep sleep, I think this needs to be said, to say that the sukha of deep sleep is tamasa, please don't interpret that to mean that Sri Krishna thinks that you sleep too much, you should sleep less. In fact, if Sri Krishna were here talking to you, he'd probably say, you need to sleep more because in modern times, most people don't get enough sleep. And if you're not getting enough sleep, you are not functioning at your best throughout the day. Adequate sleep is crucial to doing your best. Who wants to go out and just do, I'll drag my way through the day. What kind of life is that? You're capable of doing so much more than dragging yourself through the day, but if you don't get enough sleep, you will drag yourself through the day, and there are consequences to engaging in all your daily activities when you're not fully rested. I just wanted to add that here so that you don't make a mistake. He's saying that the stupor of deep sleep is tamasa. It is what it is. Similarly, the laziness of sitting in your chair is tamasa, and certainly any kind of intoxication is tamasa. So those kinds, now go up to the second line, that kind of sukha, which is mohanam atmanaha, which atmanaha for oneself is mohanam, deluding. And deluding in the sense that it's not leading you on a process of spiritual growth. That's the hallmark. At least these Rajasa Sukha that we discussed in the prior verse, if you're a karma yogi, that Rajasa Sukha actually can lead you on a path of spiritual growth, if you're a karma yogi. But here, these Tamasa Sukha, what do they say? No redeeming value. How's that? No redeeming value. And these have no redeeming value yadagre at the beginning, and cha anubandhe cha, and after a while, at the end, they have no redeeming value whatsoever. These are tamasa sukha. Now, we're towards the end of the class, and I want to include the next verse in the next class. So even though we're a few minutes early today, this is the right place to stop the class, and we will. We'll continue with this text next week. Announcements, I'll remind you that tomorrow we have our Vedanta class. Shankara's text is just wonderful. I'm just enjoying it more and more each class. Come and join us. You'll be able to follow. And then on immediately after Vedanta class is satsang at 11. If you have questions, come join us at 11. We'll conclude with our brief prayers at the altar. Om Gananahan Tva Ganapatigam Avamahe Kaving Gavinam Upamashravastamam Jeshtarajam Brahmanam Brahmanaspatanashranvan Uttabasvira Sadhanam Om Mahaganapataye Namaha Ishvaro Gururhatmeti Murti Bheda Vibhagine Vyomavad Vyapta Dehaya Dakshina Murtaye Namaha Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsa Chanuramardanam Devaki Paramhanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadgurum. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinaha Sarve Santu Niramayaha Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschad Dukkha Bhag Bhavet Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso ma jyotirgamaya mrityorma amritangamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Tat Sat.